really want to start is in the relationship arena, because I talk to people all the time who are struggling to find mates that they feel are qualified in many ways, especially their emotional health. And a lot of it has to do with their past hurts. And I know that you have a particular way that you address that called the 90s. Could you explain that concept?
Yes. First of all, thank you so much for having me on. I really am honored to be here. Um, what I often tell people in my counseling sessions, 90% of what we go through in life is about our past, and only 10% is about the present. So a couple can come in and say, oh, we got infidelity issues, and they want to make that the problem when in fact that's symptomatic of something bigger. So the 90% is to something bigger. And what often happens, couples come in with baggage, unresolved issues, unresolved trauma, and they bring it to the relationship and it spills over. And so that spillover is the 90%. Yeah, the 10% is about more about the here and now, but that 90% is about the past.
And I like that because you talked about behavior, and I always tie behavior to several things. First of all, it's your emotional state, because the way that you think is definitely impacted by your emotions. So if you are going through something at this time, you might not be thinking logically. You might be looking internally because you're going through it and you have hurt. But the point is that your emotions trigger a certain type of thought, and thought leads to behavior. So if the infidelity is the behavior, then yes, that makes sense that the past has issues that haven't been addressed that impact the emotions. So that thinking to say that it's okay for me to go outside of my marriage
is start living your life caring what other people say, then you're not going to do anything. Like I cut my hair short when everybody else was trying to have super long hair short. Like I pretty much have done what I wanted to do pertaining to my appearance, didn't care what anybody thought. And if it made me happy and I felt confident when I walked out the door, then I'm fine. I don't care if you don't like it.
To be confident, if you are, I mean, everybody says, well, it's about what's in the inside. No, the outside matters, because we are looking to be accepted in some way, shape, or form by the people that we are around. And part of that has to do with appearance. And I know even besides being an Instagram personality, or, some of the other things that you've done or some of the things that I've done, even on a regular day, the pride you have in your appearance and feeling free and confident comes from you expressing yourself. And I just feel sad for people who aren't free enough to say, hey, I really don't like this trend, but everybody else is doing it, so I guess I better go join in, or I'm not going to fit in at the club or at the office or at the country club, whatever it is. I know that you had a store, and your store was more than just a place to go buy fine vintage wear. You actually counseled people in your store, and I've even met people that would come to your store just to feel the vibe.
But one thing about that, though, again, as we talk about happy women or happy Black women or whatever that might look like, or these different capes or different things that we have to wear or we have picked up, whether we've known it or not. One of those was being everything to everyone else except for herself, and lacking really those boundaries to be able to sustain herself and sustain her family. And so my mom had already dealt with a lot of her own trauma, adverse childhood, early childhood adverse childhood experiences. And like so many of us, she never got the treatment or never got the help. She just kind of stuffed it down. And so
I don't even know that she could have really expressed.
Yes, absolutely.
Because there wasn't a freedom to do that.
No, absolutely. And, knowing kind of some of the pathologies from my family of origin, it wasn't, if anything, now how me and my mom show up, of course she's my mother, but we kind of show up as woman to woman. And I kind of let her know, hey, you have a right to set these boundaries.
Yeah.
And if they don't like it, you can exit stage left, because you have yourself, you have your children, or you have whoever, is on your team. But yeah, boundaries was unheard of. I'm like the boundary queen in my family.
You gotta have
boundaries were unheard of. And so it manifested, the early childhood trauma, just a lot of different things going on with my mom. It manifested as into substance abuse. At first, of course, like with substance abuse, no one thinks that, you're going to get hooked on something and, it started off as fun, or it started off as, cope through this, cope with this situation or that situation. And next thing I know, the woman who I looked up to, the woman who kept me safe from the world, who I thought was going to keep me safe from the world, she was no longer able to be there. And so at 14, I had to make a really, really hard decision where I knew that my life trajectory was going to go in a different place if I, at 14 years old, didn't set a boundary with my mother, who was then in active addiction. And really, I was setting a boundary with my entire family of origin that, hey, I need to go live with my father, and I need to be in a safe household, and I need to continue my education.
Okay.
So many times we stay in something because we don't want to lose face. We don't want people to say, oh, you couldn't do it, or, you just didn't have the gusto to keep on going. But you know who knows you better than anyone else? Yourself. You got to listen to yourself. And the only way to be sure that you are really hearing from yourself, and hear me, audience, the only way to be sure that you are truly hearing from yourself is to spend time with yourself on a regular basis. That means prayer, meditation, contemplation. Just have some peaceful time to really introspect. And thank you for that. But yeah, that's the only way that you knew that this wasn't for me anymore. And
God will show you. God will be like, okay, you asked for it, so let me put this in your path. And you have to be conscious and connected, because if you're not conscious and connected, when he's showing you the path and you're like, oh, that's not it, but it is it. You know what I mean? You have to pay attention to it. So
I remember looking around at my environment, and I had a aunt who was staying with us. She was also in active addiction. She was staying with us, and she was passed out on the floor. And I remember just kind of looking at my environment.
Was that scary to see that?
Honestly, it was normal.
That's unfortunate.
Now looking back on it, it was scary because I didn't know the severity of the situation I was in then. Once I just set my eyes on college, I was tunnel vision. Yeah, but now looking back, yes, it was definitely scary, but in the middle of it, it was just normal.
What do you think it was that, I know that situation triggered something in you, but even beyond that, so you had to, as much as you love your mom, your brother, and your sister, you had to separate yourself to recognize that, hey, if I'm going to do what I need to do, I have to be separate. And so while you are, and I saw you in high school, I've gone to your dance recitals. I know. And to have that separation, what did it feel like? Did it feel like, hey, I'm abandoning, or could you separate yourself and look at the long term and just kind of you can't not care.
Yeah.
But you have to brace yourself in a certain way. What did you do to say, okay, it's okay for me to make myself a priority for what I want my future to be like, because you couldn't do anything for what was happening.
Yeah. So I didn't realize how isolating it was going to be. I knew I was going to be set apart. And the funny thing is, I had already been set apart in so many ways. I remember Uncle Marvin, when I was probably 12, it was me, my cousin, and one of my god sisters at the time, and we were doing something. I don't know what we were doing. It was something like caddy or something. And I remember him sitting me down and talking to me, saying I shouldn't do this. And I was like, well, why are you talking to me? Why aren't you talking to them too? And he said, because you're different. And I was like, oh, okay. And so even like when my cousin Lionel would say, you're going to be the next Jenny. You're going to be the next Jenny. And again, Jenny was like an A+ student. She was like straight laced. And I was like, okay, this is.
She was still straight laced, but she still went out. She still dressed. She was still.
But it was something that, okay, this is something that I can aspire to. And so these different people were putting different notions into my head that, okay, you can be something more, there's something else in you. And so when I was 13, 14 years old and I had to make that decision, I would say, I think me being the oldest, and I'm a counselor by trade. Adlerian theory is one of my favorite theories to focus on.
Okay.
Because it looks at the age or birth order and how that forms personality development and all these different things.
I need to read up on that. That's very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Adlerian theory. And so I definitely think that me being the eldest and my brother, it was kind of like a pseudo parent role. In my head, it was like, okay, I need to be a positive role model for him because I have to protect him. I have to protect him. But
I think it's so easy for people to get stuck in one thing. And like having a brick and mortar and transitioning from that or evolving in different ways. Some people call it pivoting, and other people term it different ways. But I have attempted things, and for whatever reason, it didn't get to the level of success that I've wanted. But the thing that I've always thought about was, okay, I learned a lesson from here. How can I apply this lesson and move forward? Unfortunately, a lot of people don't have that idea or the support to help them move forward, so they get stuck once they did not do what they intended on doing, and then they lose faith in their dream, or they lose faith in what it is they have to do. So I have done some strange things sometimes, when you have to change. I have to put down pride and stop thinking like I'm too good to do this, but I still need to eat and pay a car payment and all this while I'm working on my dreams. Can you speak to people about not having a dream deferred, but recognizing when it's time to stay with the same thing that you love, because it's nothing as great as doing something you have passion about, and then discovering, not being afraid to really keep pushing forward with something new that would make you happy as well. I mean, my focus is really just to help give an example of how life is still going to happen to everyone, but we have to determine within ourselves to keep going. Do you feel that same way?
So when I had the brick and mortar, I had to walk away from the store because of tragic circumstance. My dad died, who was one of my business partners. And so I started doing everything online. And when I was doing it from online, I had to start from the ground up. But when I started the brick and mortar with my dad and my other business partner, I said, if I ever get to a point where selling vintage does not bring me passion, I'm going to stop. And so February of 2020, because normally when people come to me to let me know that they have items, sometimes I shop for items, sometimes people reach out to me, they're like, my grandmother died, she's got a ton of hats, do you want them? She's got a ton of dresses from the 1920s, do you want them? Wow. And I would say, yeah, so let me go take a look. Somebody reached out to me and was like, my aunt died, I have she had a house full of gloves and hats and do you want to come look through it? And I was like, yeah. But after I got off the phone with them, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And that scared me because vintage is and then I just was like, okay, well, let me sit with that. So I went and I looked at, the items that they had or whatever. And I got some items and I started, doing what I did, taking photos, pricing items. And I just was like, I really don't want to do this anymore. And I was like, that's the second time I said that. Mm-hmm. So let me sit back for a couple of weeks and find out what's going on. And what I decided was, because my store was doing really well at that time online, it was really, really good. I was mentioned in a few magazine articles and that sort of thing. So I was doing good. What I discovered was I was happier talking to people about their favorite vintage than I was trying to sling it. So I told myself, I'm going to give myself a month. And if I still have that feeling, I need to set a date to walk away from the store. But in that whole process, I was starting to do more interviews for Vintage Girl Chat. So when I made the change from Vintage Girl Chat, where I talk to people all the time about vintage, as opposed to selling vintage, it was so seamless that people were like, oh, I just noticed you stopped selling vintage. I was like, I haven't sold vintage for like 3 months. And they were like, oh my God.
Listen, let me just on that note, and then I want to get back to, just being self-aware and recognizing when it's time to leave something alone.
So I really believe that you should really suspend, calling people names, because to call someone like a narcissist or, just the number of things that people say, oh, you're bipolar. Yeah. And I'm thinking, wow, that's such a harsh thing to say to someone without the facts, state the facts, because, a lot of times when we are, judging things, it fuels unwanted emotions. So state the facts. And so I often tell people, suspend judgment, because that's a judgment. You don't have facts that this person is bipolar.
Labels hurt. Labels hurt people. Mm-hmm. And, you go from one relationship to the next thinking that you are or exhibit these traits that someone has labeled you in the previous relationship, and without being or having a center or idea of who you are self, which would require, as you say, addressing the things from the past. If that hasn't been addressed, then you're going to carry that label on to the next relationship, which is why it seems like sometimes people just go from one bad relationship to the other. And
it was extremely, extremely isolating when I had to make the decision to live with my father. Because when I was still living with my mom, it was like I was kind of put on a pedestal, but then I was kind of in between both worlds still. Yeah. But when I physically separated myself, my mom's addiction escalated, and I physically separated myself. That's when attacks came. I would just have family members, especially my family of origin, just be really, really nasty to me.
Change is hard. It's not just hard for the person making the change, but it's hard for the people who are accustomed to you being there or being a certain type of way. When we were talking yesterday, setting up the boundaries that you were talking about, I posted something about boundaries very recently, and it's like, boundaries are for you. It's for you to make sure that your emotions are intact, that you can stay focused, stay on the track that you're going. Mm-hmm. A lot of people feel like boundaries are you doing something to them. Yeah. Now, it's okay for someone not to agree with the boundaries, but again, accept you as a person who knows what you want to do. But it doesn't always feel good at all.
No. Because they feel like it's an attack on them or who they are, but I can still love you from a distance. And I think at some point now I can vocalize it, but I think that I knew it in my heart then, but I wasn't able to vocalize it. I knew that if I stayed on the path or, chose some of the behaviors or pathologies that a lot of people in my family of origin chose versus, going down a different path, I knew that there was going to be a price to pay either way. Again, I couldn't vocalize it then, but I knew it was going to be a price to pay. And I wasn't willing to pay that price. I wasn't.
Back in 2017, I was coming across so many women of all races that had problematic mother-daughter relationships. But it was the African American community that I wanted to focus on the most, because I wanted to understand what was behind the disconnect in these relationships. Not to demonize mothers, Black mothers, but wanting to understand, because mothers were once daughters themselves, and sometimes it's a multi-generational thing that's being passed down. So I wanted to see how slavery impacted those relationships, epigenetics, and undiagnosed and untreated mental illness was impacting those relationships. So we had 3 women who volunteered to share their stories. They weren't sisters, but they had problematic mother-daughter relationships. And I was so ignorant to this reality because I have a good relationship with my mom.
Yeah.
I thought all mothers love their daughters. And
as imperfect as my mom is, my grandfather said it best. My paternal grandfather said it best. He said, your mother has redeeming qualities about herself.
Absolutely.
She has redeeming qualities. I learned how to work hard from her. My work ethic is a direct example of hers. My personality. Giving.
Not just money, but I've seen her cook for people. I've seen her just be kind, go work in somebody's house to help them. Whatever it is, giving people a ride, those type of things can help someone in their lives. But you've taken on, I know your family, I know your uncles, your aunts, your grandmothers, you have the best of both sides of your family all in one. And the reason why I say that is because it is difficult to be isolated, to be singled out and still stay on the court and remain happy with a good attitude.
Absolutely. And I think with all that, again, my mom was advocating for me early on and said, no, my daughter, she might need some additional speech classes or whatnot, but no, I believe in my daughter, and my daughter is college bound. And so after that, I started believing in myself. My teachers like me. I like my teachers. And I was like, oh, I'm good at this. I always say I wasn't good at art, or I didn't have a special talent. I always say my special talent was my personality and my work ethic. So I was like, right, I'm going to go with this. And so when things did get hard, I remember focusing down. I actually remember being in 7th grade. This was my boyfriend at the time. I won't say his name in case he's going to remember this though. But we were in 7th grade. We were on the phone. He said, Whitney, do you think we're going to make it? Like, are we going to be like high school sweethearts?
Oh my goodness.
And I literally said to him, no. I said, no. I said, I'm going to be too focused on maintaining my 4.0, being valedictorian, and getting into Renaissance and getting a scholarship to college. And he said, oh, and we were 13. And then when I say I did all that, I literally did everything I said I was going to do.
If only one person is watching us today, I'm happy for that, because they have heard your story and how emotional intelligence and self-awareness and just being flexible in your ideas are all beneficial to your emotional health. Because it's nothing worse than keep trying something over and over again and not getting success. That's how people get stuck. And tell me if this isn't true. There's a thin line between staying in something and getting stuck and then just giving up on things automatically. There's a difference between the two.
There is. If you stay in something and just keep doing it, and you're getting up and it's draining from your soul and it's making you unhappy, you're stuck.
Yeah.
But if you are like on that line, like you said, like there's still a bit of a curiosity where you're like, I wonder if then that's a sign that you might need to make a pivot moment, which is kind of where I'm in my life right now. You kind of need to make a pivot moment and try something else. But again, like you said, if you listen to yourself, then I don't think I've ever gone wrong when I listen to my inner voice. Maybe on some